Assalamu alaikum, my name is Abu Salahudeen. I'm a practitioner of hijama and I'm also a lecturer around the UK on Islamic history. One of the issues that I think is very important for Muslims to address today is a growing sense of feeling amongst many people of African descent that Islam is an Arab religion, that Islam is anti-African. Unfortunately, the recent events in Saudi Arabia of the mistreatment of the Ethiopian immigrants and workers in the country and the way that they have actually been brutalized by some of the members of the Saudi authorities, unfortunately has represented very badly against Islam. If we actually look as Muslims around the world, we owe a debt of gratitude to the people of Ethiopia and the country of Ethiopia. If it hadn't been for Najashi, the king of Ethiopia, that he was kind enough to take in the Sahabas, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, when they were facing persecution in Arabia, if he had turned them away, then perhaps Islam would have ended there and then. But his kindness, that he allowed them to come into his country. And when the Quraysh were pursuing his disciples to Ethiopia, the king of Ethiopia said, "You can offer me whatever you want, I will never give these people to you." And he said, if anybody offends you or harms you, then they will be answerable to me. And I think, unfortunately, another aspect that many people of African descent have taken on a perspective that Islam is anti-African is that if we look at the history of the transatlantic slave industry, we cannot deny that Arabs were involved in slavery. But what differentiates Islam and the slavery that Islam encountered in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the type of slavery that existed in Europe, is that what Islam came to do is humanize the treatment of the people. So in reality, Islam says you give them their food, but you give them not just food to eat, you give them your food to eat. You give them the clothing that you wear. So in a reality then, they don't become servants, but more working companions. But unfortunately, and as I say, we cannot deny this, there were some Arabs that went into Africa. They captured Africans and sold them on to Europeans. I myself stand today a descendant of Jamaica and a descendant of the 100 million Africans that were taken in the 500-year period of the transatlantic slave industry. But one thing I want to emphasize, Islam is not anti-African. In fact, it's the very antithesis of being African. Because if we look at the history of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his history goes back to Africa. His greatest grandfather was Ishmael, and Ishmael's mother was from Egypt. She was, by all accounts, a black woman. We know that some of the closest companions to the Prophet Muhammad were people such as Bilal, radiallahu anhu, an Ethiopian. We know another close companion of his that is not really mentioned of, but we need to bring light to the Muslims to dispel certain attitudes that may have grown up over the years, was Ayman. Ayman was an Ethiopian slave woman who was previously called Baraka. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said of her, he said, Ayman is my mother after my mother. So here you have the beloved of God speaking of a black woman of being his mother after his mother. So Islam, with a true understanding, and with a true understanding of the prophetic tradition, would never demonize a people because of their race or ethnicity or culture or class. In fact, the Quran says that he made us into many tribes and nations so that we may know one another. And one of the easiest explanations is that we may marvel at the difference that we have. And when we encounter people from different races, then we can glory and say, look how great God's power is. That he has the ability to create me in a like form, but yet we can be so different. So Islam is not anti-African. I say this again. Islam is not anti-African. And in reality, the actions of a few misguided Muslims should not lead to a demonization of Islam.